Supreme Court okayed racial profiling. That's pretty crazy, you know? Thought that was against the law. I mean, obviously cops did it anyway, but now they can legally do it, so that's cool. 6-3 Supreme Court decision allows the Trump administration to resume sweeping immigration raids in Los Angeles. They have explicitly stated that a person's race or ethnicity can be considered a factor in the legitimacy of stopping them to accost them of being an illegal. Here, those circumstances include there is an extremely high number and percentage of illegal immigrants in the Los Angeles area, that those individuals tend to gather in certain locations to seek daily work, that those individuals often work in certain kinds of jobs, such as day labor, landscaping, agriculture, and construction, that do not require paperwork and are therefore especially attractive to illegal immigrants, and that many of those illegally in the LA area come from Mexico or Central America and do not speak much English. To be clear, apparent ethnicity alone cannot furnish reasonable suspicion under this court's case law regarding immigration stops. However, it can be a relevant factor when considered along with other salient factors. So this is like an explicit acknowledgement of the legality of using race or ethnicity as a legitimizing factor for a stop. Obviously, like if it plays into reasonable suspicion, you are saying that it's legal to racially profile. Remember, this is the same Supreme Court that said that it is racist and illegal and unconstitutional for universities to consider race when factoring in somebody's application. So you cannot legally factor race in as a consideration when it comes to anything involving affirmative action for like university acceptance. But when it comes to police making stops to deport people, you can. Completely inconsistent reasoning. There is literally no reason how, like, why you can't square that circle. You can't reconcile that inconsistency, except for the fact that allowing the police to racially discriminate makes it easier for them to be racist, whereas allowing for affirmative action, sort of employs more of an anti-racist agenda. Under this court's precedents, not to mention common sense, those circumstances taken together can constitute at least reasonable suspicion of illegal presence in the United States. The circumstances taken together mean if you see a Mexican who works as a day laborer in Los Angeles, nothing else. Importantly, reasonable suspicion means only that immigration officers may briefly stop the individual and inquire about immigration status. So yeah, again, if you are Mexican or apparently Mexican and the cops see you and you're just, day labor, anything, you don't even have to be doing day labor. You can just be a Mexican in LA. That's a relevant circumstance. They can just ask you for your papers. Just an unambiguous authoritarian ruling. If the person is a U.S. citizen or otherwise lawfully in the U.S., that individual will be free to go after that brief encounter. Only if the person is illegally in the U.S. may the stop lead to further immigration proceedings. Hey, quick question, Supreme Court of the United States of America. What if a person doesn't have their documents on them? Like, what if they don't have any documents proving they're an American citizen? Like the way I sometimes don't when I'm outside. I like how they account for two possibilities here. If you're lawfully in the United States, you're free to go. If you're not free to go. Well, what happens if you don't have the papers, please? What happens if you don't have the documents? Are we not considering that? Oh, a gray area where the federal police have the ability to exercise discretion? Jesus Christ. Yeah, it's this one's pretty bad. This is actually like really bad. Like this is a Supreme Court backed jurisprudence on the legitimacy of racial profiling. It's really bad. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not sorry. Yeah. The Fourth Amendment. There's not really any way to, if you are even remotely brown, you should have your documents on you, like all the time, basically. We're at that point now. Like you should have, I don't know if your birth certificate or your green card, just like some document that legitimizes your legal presence in the United States. Anything that proves that you're a citizen or a legal resident, you should have that on you. Because right now, the Supreme Court has explicitly said, like, your race is a legitimate factor in their decision to profile you. Yeah, if you speak Spanish in public, that is now a factor. Of course, it's worth noting that the police have always profiled in this way. The difference now is that it can't be challenged. Like, they have been given permission to. And there is a meaningful difference there. There's a difference between the police, like, getting away with it, because they always have, versus the Supreme Court explicitly authorizing it. It emboldens them, and it allows them to pursue it as a matter of course. They can pursue it as deliberate, explicit, open, acknowledged policy. If you say, what the man, what's your right? Fourth Amendment, no unreasonable stops and seizures. They can just say, we saw you speaking Spanish and you're brown. That is now legally a legitimate excuse. They can just say that. They probably won't say it that explicitly, but they could. Check out page 7 of the document. But what if I don't want to? Government's efforts to prioritize stricter enforcement of the immigration laws enacted by Congress. Notably, moreover, the district court's injunction threatens contempt sanctions. The district court's injunction threatens contempt sanctions against immigration officers who make brief investigative stops later found by the court to violate the injunction. How terrible. The prospect of such after-the-fact judicial second-guessing and contempt proceedings will inevitably chill lawful immigration enforcement efforts. Well, I appreciate them being explicit with it, you know. I appreciate them being open about it. See, the existence of the Fourth Amendment makes the police vulnerable to after-the-fact legal action if they violate your constitutional rights. Unfortunately, that would get in the way of the mass deportation proceedings that we're engaged in right now, so we're just going to put a hold on the Fourth Amendment. On the two most critical factors, therefore, the government has demonstrated that a stay is warranted. Turning then to the balance of harms and equities, as with many other applications, there's Justice Scalia, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's the important part. Which documents do people need to hold? Do they specify? No, because an explicit acknowledgement that you ought to hold documents would make us sound like an authoritarian country. No, no, no. It's just good sense for you to do so. Anything that proves your citizenship. What if you have a real ID? I don't know whether whether or not that proves your citizenship depends on the state, doesn't it? Some states allow you to have driver's licenses without being a legal citizen. I don't know. I think it depends. Chat, we should be screaming this shit like psychos in the streets, but you're not. You're in a live stream chat. Sorry, but again, unfortunately, this is one of those the Tree of Liberty situations. Most people don't engage with government day to day. Most people live in boxes, drive to work in boxes. Now they work from home, so they stay in the same box. People don't care. Nobody goes outside. Nobody has friends. Nobody knows their neighbors. There's no social fabric that binds people together, so there's nothing to outrage people when the social fabric is compromised. Unfortunately, it seems like this country is just going to have to suffer a long, languid, period of misery for people to understand the reason why we don't do this. I don't really. It seems like there's no real pushback. I mean, even now, most of the people watching this right now, you haven't been affected by the Trump administration at all, right? Like some of you maybe in some marginal ways, but for the most part, you only know about this because you watch the news. See, a lot of these consequences are only felt later, after the fact, downstream, or they affect people who aren't you. Most of the people watching aren't, for example, undocumented immigrants. A lot of you are foreigners, Well, there's the reason people bind together is because they have that net, that social fabric that allows them to respond as though an attack on one of them is an attack on all of them. That's how protests work. You can't have a protest where everyone is so atomized that they only go out and respond if they personally are affected. But we just don't live in that world anymore. Not in the United States, at least. There are countries that have that, I guess everyone's been affected because of the tariffs, at least. Oh, goody, Vosh is telling us to lay down and die. You got a listening problem? You have to understand where this stuff comes from, okay? It's not that everyone just magically became in favor of authoritarianism, okay? People just don't really understand or connect with the consequences of stuff like this, Be willing to bet most people don't even understand what the Bill of Rights is and what it protects and what the purpose of those protections are. Nobody has an ideological attachment to democracy. Certainly not the Democrats. Anytime the Republicans do something explicitly anti-democratic, the Democrats are only upset on procedural grounds. This is illegal. This violates our norms, etc. Nobody's an ideological advocate for democracy. And as a consequence, nobody feels outrage over stuff like this. People are okay with the violations of rights as long as they happen to other or undesirable people. Or I'll put it this way, I guess, Most everyone's read To Kill a Mockingbird, but everyone, Democrats and Republicans, forms a lynch mob when they see someone unpopular, if there's a person who very obviously commits a crime, everyone's okay with going, oh, that guy, you could just kill him or whatever. There aren't really, it's not popular to be an ideological liberal anymore, And I mean ideological liberal, not in the neoliberal sense. I mean it in belief in due process, belief in the constitutional rights and so on, that kind of way. Enlightenment stuff. Will Mitch McConnell realize he's one of the main architects of America's demise? Who the cares what who cares what he wants or thinks or whether he exists? He's gonna be dead soon. I doubt he even realizes he doesn't care. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make here, I guess, is that like unlike something like a monarchy or an authoritarian government, I think that all modern governments rely either on the existence of or the myth of the existence of public consensus. A monarch only cares about public opinion insofar as the peasants don't revolt. Like, it doesn't really matter that much whether or not the king is popular. What matters is that the peasants are content and productive. They don't need to be liked. But in both democracies and fascist governments, the leader needs to be popular. Like, authoritarian governments nowadays rely on public fervor. Fascism demands public fervor, and democracies can't function if every single leader is unpopular. Everyone cares about public opinion now. There are no authoritarian leaders that don't spend time on PR, or if there are, they're in countries that are so war-torn and despotic and unproductive that, there's barely anything to control. I don't know exactly how much time is spent on PR in Burkina Faso or South Sudan. Actually, yes, I do. In Burkina Faso, the military junta spends a ton of time aura farming when they're not losing villages to ISIS. Everyone cares about being popular. The reason we're losing all of these liberal norms right now is because it's much, much, much easier to be fervent. I forget the word. To have fervor for fascism than for, the liberal norms. Who gives a Do any of you guys believe in them? When was the last time you gave a shit about democratic proceduralism? When was the last time you got excited about due process? You know? I watched 12 Angry Men recently, and I was pretty hyped up about it back then. But that movie could not happen today. Nobody would be willing to sit down and watch a movie today about a dramatization of due process. People are too cynical. Nobody would go in there thinking, wow, well, the point of it is it's a celebration of the virtues of this system. It's not even about whether or not the defendant is guilty or innocent. Did you hear they're making an all-female reboot? Yeah, they call it I know this one. They call it 12 Women. Beat you to the punch. Anyway, yeah, you got to believe in shit is my point. I really do believe in this, by the way. This like civilizational fervor. You have to have the will to live. It's kind of like how sometimes people can live a really long time. They just have to be willful. Like if you give up on life and you're kind of old, like you're 75 or something, and you're just like bed rotting, your ass is going to die. But if you have a strong will to live, you keep going for a really long time. Oftentimes it is like that, by the way. A whole bunch of like lifespan stuff, that people's longevity comes down to genetics and a will to live. It's weird, but like, there is a relationship between your mind and your body. I think that civilizations work much the same way, which is weird because I'm pretty sure fascists believe the same thing, but they think that civilizational fervor is like, I don't know, child trad wives and racism, and I think that it's like the collective consensus to build a better future. I think that my version of this theory is a little bit more workable. Hot take there? Yeah, well, this all seems very anti-materialist. No, I think it's true. I think that like you can make an argument that material conditions play into this. I think that we used to be very, very optimistic about the future, and I think that optimism more or less died with the end of the Soviet Union. The neoliberal era, like what we got in the 1980s with Reagan, paired with the fact that we're no longer in a civilizational struggle for the world with the Soviet Union, but rather like in a process of further consolidation of the world, it strips the narrative bare. And a lot of people do kind of believe there's not really anything better, like, coming up. We don't even talk about civilizational progress anymore in terms of social betterment. Nowadays, it's all about technology, you know? Like, whenever you hear about the world being made better, it's, well, here's a new bit of medical technology. Here's a new bit of, it was somebody invented something. And that's great. Inventing stuff is cool and everything. Nobody really envisions a better way of doing things anymore, In that respect, we've stagnated quite a bit. They do in China, India, Indonesia, and other Eastern nations. Don't engage in Orientalism. They're suffering from the same problems right now. China, for example, is going to have to come up with a new national narrative that isn't, we invented the Chinese middle class, real soon. Because people are not having kids over there, and people are not continuing to experience quality of life increases at the same pace as they were in the early 2000s. It's complicated, is all I'm saying. It's complicated. But they're actively developing technologies and systems of civilizational progress well beyond that of the West. I don't really think that's true. I think that's a little bit Orientalist. We're very much the same, Basically, every country on earth is suffering from the same problem. In my opinion, I think it comes down to monetary policy. I think the fundamental problem, like the root problem, is that economic drivers are what society is built around, right? Like socioeconomics is a term for a reason. You can't have society without an economy, and vice versa. And in every country on earth right now, except for ones that are so war torn that they're not functional, and I don't know, North Korea or whatever, the best way to make money is speculative investment, right? It used to be the best way to make money was to sell a product or a service. And nowadays, the best way to make money is to borrow it and reinvest it in something that is very speculatively valuable so that you can make more money on the returns, pay back your debt, and leverage the existing money to borrow more money to loan or to leverage that money. And that's how it works now. And I think that as long as the bulk of like our resources are being committed to that process, it's basically impossible to think of the world as a material space designed to be improved. You know, if the real economy doesn't exist, what the hell is the point in investing in it? Like, what's the point in engaging in it? You know, I don't know. Also, we might have to get rid of the internet. I get like a big flash of the we need to get rid of the internet thing every time I'm reminded that every single right wing account online is Indian. Sorry, I listen. Okay, it's not about bigotry. It's that it's again, it's economic incentives, okay? It's economic incentives. Ban Indian IP addresses. Okay, but like it's like every right-wing account on Twitter, dude. It's all of them. It's crazy how many of them are Indian. It's insane. Tons of Twitter right-wing pundits going silent as the internet cable. Yeah, there was an internet outage. Some undersea cables got up, and it led to an internet outage in large parts of India and Pakistan, and a whole bunch of the right-wing internet went dark for a bit. Jesus Christ. Indians and Russians? Yeah, I see way more of it from Indians, though. There's just more Indians that speak English. Like, a ton of them speak English, right? I don't know how many Russians speak English. In absolute numbers, it has to be fewer. Why do you think that is? Because in India, you can make a decent living being a blue check Twitter account. It's entirely because Elon monetized the process. Like you get a tiny bit of money off of other blue checks looking at your blue check stuff. In America, you cannot make a living off of that. In India, you can. So all of these blue check accounts that post relentlessly nonstop, like they're incentivized in countries that have lower average wages. Also, there are a ton of English-speaking Indians. Indian isn't a language. Yeah, but that's the same. It's the same reason why the like tech services are often outsourced to India, and why like there's a bunch of scammers there and stuff like that. A lot of English-speaking people with a decent amount of like spread of internet access, with a lower average wage, so they can make like a pretty good living off of something that's not financially viable here in the West. I blame all this on the British, TBH. That's probably fair. Yeah, that's probably fair.